Chapter 16, Cocoons! 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 We just heard about some cocoons, didn't we? The chrysalises that the great shells hide in. By the way, just before this chapter starts, we get this page here, which is the Alesi Codes of War. You know, the codes that Gavilar told Dalinar to follow, and he does. Readiness. The officer will be prepared at all times for battle, never drunken on wine, never without his weapon. Inspiration. The officer will wear his uniform when in public to look ready for war and to give strength to his troops. Restraint. The officer will refrain from needless duels, arguments, or squabbles with other officers in camp to prevent injury to men who may be needed to command. Leadership. The officer will require no action of his soldiers that he would not be willing to perform himself. Honour. The officer will not abandon allies on the field, nor will he seek to profit from the loss of his allies. They seem fairly straightforward and perfectly reasonable, don't they? No quote at the top of this chapter, because instead we are cast into the past 7.5 years ago. And we're back with child Kaladin, who insisted in those days on being called Cal. Which is handy for Brandon, isn't it? Because it makes it easy to differentiate between Kaladin now and Kaladin then. I'm not criticising, it's a good technique, it makes it easier to tell between them as a reader. But he's playing with a girl called Laryl, who he's just starting to be interested in, and his doomed younger brother Tien, who nobody knows he's doomed at this point, but he is, we know. And Laryl is being very grouchy about him being sent off to Kharbranth to train as a surgeon, and Cal is being all comedy, why? I don't understand why you're grumpy about that. But then Tien cheers him up, as he always does. Tien finds a little lurg, which is a little animal they find. It sounds like a tiny great shell, basically. They find it in a cocoon, which they dissolve with water. It has slick brown and green skin, eyes in the centre of its back, and 6 legs. So they find one of them, and then they go down and talk to some local kids who have to worm polyps. Ugh, they have to worm some polyps. Ugh, I don't know what that means. Can't remember. And they have to work the fields, and they're all very jealous of Cal, who doesn't have to do that, although they don't know how hard he has to work studying anatomy. Well, Laryl's up to some tricks. She likes to play the boys against each other, apparently for attention, and so it ends in a little skirmish between Cal and an older boy called Jost. Jost wins the fight, but that's not the point, or at least not in Cal's eyes. The point is that Cal held a staff for a moment during the fight, and it was like, oh, like it just feels great, like he was destined to fight with a staff. And significantly, he has a chance to win, but he doesn't take it, because he can't bring himself to hurt anybody. So, he loses the fight, and then he offers, tell you what, Jost, I'll do all of your worming and farmy worming if you'll teach me everything your far is teaching you about how to fight with a staff. And Jost goes, nope. And everybody just runs away. Tien was nearby, but he's gone as well, but he's left a little stone behind. This is a thing he does. It's just normal, boring stone, apparently, but it's just a thing Tien does. He leaves stones for people. So Cal goes home, and he finds his father sitting somberly alone in the dark. Turns out something really quite incredibly bad has happened. The local city lord, Wistiau, who happens to be Laryl's dad, and Kaladin's dad's friend, has died. He was always frail and Lyral couldn't save him, but here's the significant thing for us, for the ongoing plot. As his last dying wish, Wistiau has given Lirin, that's Kaladin's dad, a load of dosh, and he's told him to use it to send his son off to be trained to be a surgeon properly, so that this sort of thing doesn't have to keep on happening. So Cal's fate is sealed. He's got to go and be a surgeon, and just as he learned how much he likes wielding a weapon too. Now, of course, we know that he ends up being a weapon-wielding soldiery guy, and then, from thence, ends up being a bridgeman, so that doesn't work out very well. Don't follow your dreams, kids. With these thoughts in his mind, Kaladin washes the stone that Tien left for him, and that kind of brings out the patterning in it, and it's like a little smiley face. Nice one, Tien. You always know how to cheer a fella up. So about the polyps that we mentioned they farm. These are lavis polyps, and once they've been harvested, its grain feeds the entire town, plus the armies. Now, we'd just been told in the previous chapter that it's actually soulcasting stuff that feeds the armies. So I guess, because soulcasters turn things into other things, the grain is like the raw material, and then that gets soulcasted into something a bit nicer for the armies to eat. But you've got to watch out for worms. Remember, they were worming polyps? Well, if a worm gets into one of the polyps, it's going to eat all the grain, and then when you harvest the polyp, you just end up with a great big massive slug the size of 2 ants. The origin of storms is mentioned again. I think we had that a couple of chapters ago, and once again, it does seem to be a particular fixed place, and not one that anyone has been to. It is suicide to sail out there. A little bit about the difference between classes here, because everybody believes, or rather everybody in the Dark Eyes cast, believes that if a Dark Eyes was to win a shard blade out on the field of battle, then his eyes would turn light. This is actually their primary motivation for going to war, but it's probably entirely an old wives' tale because nobody can think of any actual examples of it ever having happened. They have something here called creme. Ugh. And it's this dark brown sludgy horrible stuff that falls with the rain. And it does seem to fall with, it's not just that it, it lands on soil and you get mud. No, it seems to fall with the rain. And so you have to wait and let the rainwater sit for a day while the creme settles, and then pour off the fresh water and you can use the creme in pottery. So it is clay, but it falls from the sky? Unless I just read it wrong and it's just saying that, it's just clay. We learned that the village where Cal lives is called Heartstone, and all of the houses are basically wedge shape with one big slopey roof which is pointed towards where the storm's going to come from. They built their houses aerodynamically so that the wind just sails right over them. Now the pointed sides don't tend to have windows, but the big side, that's just all window to make up for it. And we learned that Tien, poor old little doomed Tien, is 10 years old, but he looks about 5. He's a tiny little widdly fella. And he's gonna die! Bye!